So a few days ago, I revisited both Sage and Reaper, our two new jobs added in Endwalker. Some time has passed since they were released, so I thought it was a good time to take another look at them. I enjoy playing both a fair amount, but Sage has quickly become my new favorite healer. So I thought, why not talk a bit more about Sage, our healers, and why it's become my new favorite. So prior to Endwalker, while I did have a favorite healer, which was Scholar, it wasn't my most played one. That was probably White Mage. And it was for the simple reason that I just don't often heal full party content. If I'm healing something, it's usually a dungeon, and when doing dungeons, White Mage was just too comfy to not play. For full party content, however, I much prefer the barrier healer playstyle. I know that Astrologian's Nocturnal Sect also offered that playstyle, but I preferred Scholar's kit, and well, Nocturnal Astrologian doesn't exist anymore, so it wouldn't be a contender in our current game. The reason why I prefer the barrier healer playstyle is because of the control that it offers over the mitigation of an encounter. I vividly remember my first experience healing Titan Savage in Party Finder. I hadn't healed Savage in a while, so I wanted to get back to it, build some more comfort on our healers, and I went into the fight on White Mage. Pretty easy healer to play, not much to pay attention to, felt like it would be perfect for the job. And it was! First two phases went by without too much trouble, but once we hit phase 3 everything fell apart for the simple reason that the party was not using enough mitigation. Reprisal, other raid-wide tank cooldowns, range stuff like Troubadour, and of course my co-healer who was a Scholar also wasn't using their mitigation properly. So it ended with me running dry on mana really quickly, desperately trying to keep the party alive, but to no avail. A couple of tries later and the party disbanded. I then tried it again in a new party, this time on Scholar, and it was a world of difference. Even with the rest of the party still not using all of their mitigation tools, I was able to take care of a lot of it. Spread out low, fairy and seraph stuff, sacred soil, just making use of my tools, and it felt like we could have probably gotten away with barely using any GCD heals in that final phase. Which compared to me running dry on mana because I was spamming too many GCD heals and it still not being enough was a world of difference. So that experience basically solidified my preference for the barrier healers. And to be honest, I prefer mitigating damage before it happens rather than planning my heals to heal up said damage. I know it's essentially the same, you're just planning before damage instead of after, but I guess I just like seeing my party take little damage compared to being able to heal back up efficiently. Might have something to do with me being used to playing tank and mitigation really being the only thing you can do there, but it is what it is. Now, with Endwalker, things initially didn't really change a whole lot. White Mage is still strong in dungeons, and the new Scholar also feels really damn good to play. Shorter cast time on Broil makes the weaving aspect feel much better, and the new tools like Expedients are fantastic, so I could have easily stuck to both of them for their respective content. However, Sage offered enjoyment in both. In dungeons, the AoE aspect feels so much more active than for any of the other healers. Like, sure, I know Astrologian has like a million weaves to do, but they just have so many off-global cooldowns that it just becomes tedious to me, and that's also the main reason why I don't particularly like the current Astrologian at the moment. But Sage has a good balance. As you're running up to the mobs, you can shield your tank and yourself, and then it's this little mini game of you trying to outrun the tank so that your shield can break to give you an added sting stack, but also not going too fast so that your tank will not get angry at you or that the mobs will just eat you alive. Which, by the way, for any tanks out there that are getting annoyed by their Sage running ahead and pulling mobs before they can get there, they're probably trying to break their shield for more DPS. So don't worry about it too much. It's most likely not meant in a bad way of them non-verbally telling you that you're going too slow or something like that. So it makes the gathering of mobs a little bit more fun, and then the actual AoE is also pretty good. You have your spammable AoE, you have your Toxicon stacks if you were able to gather them, and you have your charged action Phlegma, and you can also use Numa for both healing and DPS at the same time. As for healing, I just usually like to regen bomb my party. Krasis on the tank, Phases and then Kerachoil can regen the whole party in case someone grabbed aggro of a random mob. And it will also give some added mitigation to the tank as well. And I can also stagger the use of Haima and Panhaima for both of the mob pulls if it feels necessary. So you've got a lot of tools, lots of different buttons that are being pressed, and that is what I enjoy. Feels much better than just spamming Holy and maybe a Tetragrammaton or a Lily here or there. Another reason why I gravitated towards White Mage for dungeons, by the way, is because it also did the highest personal DPS out of the healers. So if I got pairs with people that weren't really pulling their weight, then I at least didn't really feel like my buffs were going to waste. I'd be able to carry some of the damage myself, which sounds really sad when I'm saying it like that, but it wasn't a rare occasion that I would be top DPS throughout a dungeon as a healer. And now with Sage, we essentially have the barrier healer equivalent of this selfish DPS healer. Believe Sage is a bit weaker compared to White Mage, but it's very close, and with the much more fun gameplay than White Mage, I'll gladly take it. As for full party stuff, which is where I used to play Scholar the most, it's tough to be honest. Scholar has a lot going for itself, even more so in Endwalker with the addition of expedience and the shorter cast time on Broil. And it wasn't until I started to play Sage that I started to appreciate the Fairy a lot more, because you can place your Fairy in the middle and then she'll heal the whole team. Can't do that on Sage, you gotta move to the middle yourself if you want to reach everyone, in case they are spread out, that is. But the Fairy, while having this nice upside of being able to be placed and you don't have to worry about your own positioning for the heals, it also has some downsides. While the responsiveness does feel a bit improved from before, it can still feel a bit slow at times and you might feel like you're waiting on your skills to come out. You also don't really get to choose who the embraces go on anymore, and when you dissipate your Fairy, you also need to remember to place her in the middle again. Those are things that you don't really have to worry about with Sage. All of your healing and mitigation comes from you, so it'll happen immediately when you press your off-global cooldowns. And almost everything that Scholar can do, Sage can do as well. The main thing that you can't do is give your team a 10-second sprint, and while it certainly has come in useful during our proc in DSR, I could have just used my own sprint and it would have been fine. And Panheima is certainly strong in its own regard, which is kind of the alternative that Sage has. But both of their ups and downs, and one will be better over the other depending on the situation. Being able to place your soil from a distance can be very nice, but on the other hand, applying the effects of soil to you as a buff allows you to carry the soil with you, so for things like rough flames or giga flares, that would take the win. So there's no real winner in my opinion. They both have very solid healing and mitigation tools, and when I play one, I sometimes miss the tools that the other has, and that goes both ways. However, the reason why Sage takes the win is because of how their job gauge works and their DPS kit. I've never really been a fan of dissipation, maybe it's just because I'm not a good enough Scholar player, but I just never really liked being locked out from being able to use my Fairy when I needed it. I guess once you really plan out your healing and your mitigation, that's not really an issue anymore, but as the casual healer that I am, the skill has seen very little use from me, and not using it is a DPS loss, because it results in less energy drains. While I don't really mind Aether Flow and Energy Drain too much, I do prefer Sage's Gauge. With Sage you can just use your stacks when you need them, be it for healing or for mana I guess, but with Scholar you need to use your Aether Flow on cooldown to get the most out of it, because even if you don't need it for the heals, you still want to be using it on Energy Drain, because that's DPS, and Energy Drain also is sort of like a necessary evil, because when they decided to remove Energy Drain at the start of Shadowbringers, it just felt awful dumping stacks on Lustrate so that you wouldn't be wasting stacks. So I was glad that they gave Energy Drain back to alleviate that problem, but I don't know, I guess it just feels a bit more rigid than the Sage Gauge. You get the same amount of stacks to use per minute, and you also have Rizomata to pull an extra stack if you were to need one, so it just feels that little bit better to me. And then the general way to DPS is also just more fun to me. I'm just a fan of charged actions, so Sage having one, or technically two if we're including Numa as well, is going to be a win for me. It also makes planning movement that little bit more fun. With Scholar, if you have to double weave or do a big movement, it's either your dot or using Ruin 2. With Sage, you have your dot, you have Phlegma, and then you also have the limited stacks of Toxicon to use throughout a fight, so you can play around all of those things, which makes it more interesting for me. And whenever you need to do a GCD shield, you can also do it on the fly while moving around, which is also something that you can't really do on Scholar unless you make use of Swiftcast. And while Eucrasia isn't something that you use all the time, it does feel unique and makes Sage stand out a little bit more. And it also has a movement ability in Icarus, which, as I mentioned in my previous video, is just a lot of fun to use, even if it's not really something that is necessary. So all things considered, while I enjoy playing both healers a lot, Sage pulls out slightly ahead and is currently my favorite healer to play in all content and not just in dungeons or in full party content. So let me know down below what your favorite healer is and why, and with that I want to thank you for watching, I want to thank my Patreons for their support, and I'll see you in the next one.